"You idiot," he roared, just as the wine glass left his hand. It struck the edge of my cheek before exploding across my blouse, drenching me in Merlot and humiliation. For a split second, the entire room froze, the clink of forks, the quiet jazz from the speakers, even the waiter mid-step. Everything stopped. Then came the laughter. Not from strangers. From his friends. Grown adults in their 50s, like us. People who'd toasted our anniversaries, who'd eaten at our table, now laughing like they'd just witnessed a sitcom moment. I stood there motionless, cold liquid dripping down my collar, mascara burning into my eyes. And all I could think was, this man. This man who once called me his best friend. This man I've been married to for 14 years just did this. I didn't cry. Not this time. I didn't storm out either. I simply looked at him, really looked, and I smiled. Because something inside me snapped, but not in the way he expected. No rage. No panic. Just clarity. He thought he was making a scene. What he didn't know was, he just handed me the opening move. And I was going to burn it all down, piece by piece. He humiliated me in public. Threw a glass of wine in my face like I was disposable, then laughed with his friends as if it was just a joke. But it wasn't the first time he made me feel small. Just the first time I let him think I'd do nothing about it. My name is Diane, I'm 52 years old, and I was married to Mark for nearly a decade and a half. I gave up more than I'll ever admit to keep our life looking picture perfect. But now, I'm done. And what he did at that table, that was his final mistake. We met late. I was 37 when Mark and I crossed paths later than most for what you'd call a first marriage, but I never liked rushing things. I'd spent my 30s building a career, caring for my aging mother, and surviving 2 back-to-back relationships with men who looked great on paper but cracked under pressure. When I met Mark, he seemed different. Stable. Grounded. He ran a small but successful logistics company and spoke in complete sentences. He didn't play games. He knew what he wanted, and in those early days, what he wanted was me. He courted me like a grown man does. Flowers without apology, dinners without expectation. He listened. He asked about my day. I remember thinking, this is what maturity looks like. He made it easy to say yes. We married when I was 38, he was 41. I moved into his house, technically ours, though he had picked every chair, rug, and fork before I arrived. Still, I made it home. I added warmth where there was once sterile minimalism. He didn't object, but he didn't compliment it either. That should have been a sign. The first few years were good. Comfortable, even. We both worked a lot. He ran the company. I was a regional manager for a national retailer. We had dinners, we took trips, we hosted friends. From the outside, we looked solid. Stable. Boring, even. But there was safety in that. Then my job downsized. I was 45 and suddenly unemployed for the first time since college. I remember crying in the car outside our house, thinking I was a failure. When I told Mark, he didn't console me. He didn't rage either. He just said, well, I guess we'll have to tighten the budget. Then he left for a golf weekend with his college buddies. That was the first time I felt it, that cold shift in his eyes. That absence of softness. A few weeks later, he suggested I take a break from work for a while. Maybe I could manage the house, do the books for his company part-time. Just until you find something else, he said. It sounded supportive. Sensible. And I wanted to feel useful again, so I agreed. That break lasted 6 years. During that time, I became invisible. I handled payroll, filed invoices, sent client reminders. I cleaned the house top to bottom, planned all our dinners, handled every family obligation. He didn't thank me. He expected it. I became the woman who made life easy for him. And somewhere along the way, he stopped seeing me. We stopped kissing goodnight. He stopped holding my hand. Sex became functional, scheduled, if it happened at all. I would lie awake at night staring at the ceiling, listening to him snore, wondering when I'd become a roommate in my own marriage. Friends would say, "Mark's so lucky to have you," and I'd smile. I was good at smiling, even when it hurt. Then came the belittling. Quiet at first, comments about how I wasn't keeping up with younger women, how I'd let things go a bit. At dinner parties, he'd interrupt me mid-sentence, correct my stories, mock my memory. One time, when I spilled wine on the tablecloth, he muttered, "Of course you did," like I was a child he was sick of parenting. But I stayed, because leaving at 50 felt like failure. Because I thought it was too late to start over. Because I didn't know who I was anymore outside of Mark's wife. Then came that night. He had invited some clients and a few friends, mostly men, the kind who laughed too loud and ordered expensive scotch just to show off. I didn't like them, but Mark insisted I come. "They like a woman's touch," he said. "Besides, you clean up well when you try." So I tried. I wore the navy dress he used to love. I curled my hair. I painted my lips in that deep burgundy shade he once called dangerous. I smiled when they made jokes I didn't like. I played hostess. I passed the wine. And then, somewhere between appetizers and the second bottle, Mark made a comment about one of his coworkers cheating on his wife. Everyone laughed. I said, offhandedly, "Sounds like a great team culture you're building over there." It was meant to be light, witty, but his smile froze. Then he picked up his glass and threw it in my face. The moment the wine hit me, everything slowed. I remember the sharp scent of tannins and citrus clinging to my skin, the chill soaking through the front of my dress, the way the restaurant's lighting shimmered off the shards of broken glass at my feet. But what I remember most, the thing seared into my brain, was Mark's face. He wasn't shocked by what he'd done. He wasn't horrified. He looked satisfied. The men at the table erupted in laughter. Real, ugly, howling laughter. One of them slapped the table. Another actually said, "Damn, Mark." And then someone whistled. I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I stood there, blinking slowly, the wine dripping from my lashes. A waitress nearby had frozen, unsure whether to step in. A couple at the next table stared, mouths open. No one moved. Mark sat back in his chair, lifted a napkin, and dabbed his chin like a smug aristocrat. "Well," he said, as if nothing had happened, "maybe next time you'll know when to shut up." That was it. That was the sentence. The moment my body stilled completely, but something inside me came alive. It wasn't rage, though that would come later. It was something colder, cleaner, like ice forming across a frozen pond. I slowly set down the empty bottle I'd been holding, white wine, untouched, and reached for the cloth napkin on the back of my chair. I wiped my face carefully. My hands didn't shake. Then I smiled. Not the kind of smile that makes people feel warm. The kind that makes people uncomfortable. The kind that means something's about to shift. Mark noticed it. I saw the flicker in his eyes. Confusion. Maybe a hint of unease. "I'm going to excuse myself," I said quietly. "It's clear I'm not welcome here." He opened his mouth, probably to say something cruel, but I cut him off. "Don't worry. I'll see myself out. Permanently." I turned and walked out of that restaurant soaked in red, leaving a trail of wine behind me like a path of blood. I didn't rush. I didn't look back. Outside, the air was cool and sharp. I stood there on the curb, blinking up at the moon, and took the deepest breath I'd taken in years. I didn't have a plan yet, but I had made a decision. And that was the first real thing I'd done for myself in over a decade. I took a cab home, our home. When I arrived, I went straight upstairs, peeled off the wet dress, and stepped into the shower. As the water washed away the wine, I felt like I was shedding a skin I never wanted in the first place. After drying off, I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my laptop. That's when I remembered something. The company. His company. Or so he thought. Years ago. When Mark needed to restructure the business to protect assets during a lawsuit, he had shifted partial ownership to me. Just on paper, he'd said at the time, "In case anything happens." I had signed the documents, not realizing that meant I legally owned 49% of his company. I pulled up the documents from the shared drive where I had filed everything over the years. Payroll, tax records, ownership breakdown, contracts. My name was there, clear as day. Diane Wexley, co-owner and financial director. And with that, I began to build. I created backups, downloaded years of financial records, emailed myself copies of contracts. I flagged suspicious payments, expenses I had ignored before but now viewed with new eyes. Unauthorized bonuses to himself. Client entertainment, charges at strip clubs. Personal travel expenses billed to the company. I kept it all. By the time the sun rose, I wasn't a humiliated housewife anymore. I was a woman with leverage. The plan had started forming the moment I saw those files. But it wasn't until I found the hidden folder on our shared company drive that everything snapped into place. It was labeled Q4 bonuses, but when I opened it, the documents told a very different story. There, buried in a series of PDFs, was a wire transfer of $15,000, sent monthly for over a year, to someone listed only as KW. I clicked through the statements, one by one, my pulse picking up with each page. The notes read, consulting, strategy sessions, vendor development. Lies. I didn't recognize the name. So I did what anyone would do. I searched the transfer history. And it didn't take long before I found the real identity of KW. Her name was Caitlin Whitaker. She was 29 years old. A consultant, sure, but for yoga retreats and feminine empowerment coaching, not logistics. Her Instagram was a scrapbook of beach selfies, champagne brunches, and handwritten affirmations like, "Your womb knows your worth." I almost laughed. Almost. Scrolling through her feed, I found them pictures of her and Mark. Candid. Intimate. Not just vacation shots, but full-on couple content. Her lounging in a hotel robe. Him smiling in the background, wine glass in hand. Hashtags like hashtag grateful man, hashtag healing love, and hashtag divine provider. He had been funding her lifestyle with company money. Our money. And while I balanced books and folded his laundry, he'd been taking this woman to spa resorts and calling it client development. I closed the laptop slowly. My hands didn't shake. Not anymore. What I felt now wasn't shock, it was clarity. For months, maybe even years, he had been gaslighting me into silence, eroding my confidence while building a parallel life with someone who called herself a goddess. And yet he had the audacity to throw wine in my face in front of his friends. This wasn't just betrayal. This was insult layered on betrayal, wrapped in arrogance. And he thought I wouldn't find out? That night, I sent an email to our shared lawyer, the one who handled the business side of things. Subject line, ownership clarification. Body. Hi, Greg. As per our previous filings, I'm confirming that I retain 49% ownership of Wexley Logistics LLC. In light of some recent issues, I'd like to discuss what options exist for executing an internal audit and initiating a temporary freeze on discretionary spending and bonus payouts. Please confirm receipt. Diane. Within an hour, he responded. Professional. Neutral. But I could almost hear the nervous clicking of his keyboard. Of course. Per the bylaws, you are well within your rights to initiate a financial review. Shall we set a meeting for Monday? Yes. Yes, we shall. And then I sent another email, this time to Caitlin Whitaker. Simple. Direct. Hello, Caitlin. You don't know me, but I believe we've met indirectly. Since you've been receiving unreported funds from a company I partially own, I wanted to give you the courtesy of a heads up before I involve the IRS and our corporate counsel. You may wish to retain legal representation. All the best. Diane Wexley. I hit send. Closed the laptop. Then I smiled. He thought he had humiliated me. He didn't realize he had armed me. He came home 2 days later like nothing had happened. I was in the kitchen making tea when the front door slammed. I didn't flinch. Just kept stirring honey into my cup while his expensive loafers echoed down the hallway. Diane, he called, too loud, too cheerful. You've been ignoring my texts. You left quite the mess at Bravino's, you know. Had to explain to everyone you were on your period or something. I didn't turn around. Would you like some tea? He stopped short, confused. I could feel the silence swell behind me. What? I finally turned. Tea. Chamomile. You look tense. He blinked. You're joking, right? No, I said. I'm just being polite. Since this is still technically your house. He stepped closer, dropping his keys onto the counter like he owned the space. Look, maybe we both overreacted the other night. You embarrass me in front of my friends. You get a little too mouthy when you've had wine. I stared at him. Calm. Quiet. So your solution was to throw it in my face? He had the audacity to shrug. It was dramatic. You like drama, don't you? Something in me coiled tighter. But I didn't let it show. I've started a financial audit, I said, voice still even. For the company. Should be done within a week. He froze. What? I've also frozen all discretionary spending, including personal draws, until the books are clean. He laughed. A single bark. You can't do that. I own 49%, Mark. You put it in my name. Remember? He stared. I could see it now, the exact second he realized I wasn't bluffing. That the woman he thought he could humiliate like a trophy wife on clearance sale had suddenly become a threat. You're being emotional, he said, trying to sound firm. This isn't personal, Diane. You're not thinking clearly. Oh, I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years. I stepped forward, slow and deliberate. And speaking of personal, Caitlin sends her regards. He went pale. His mouth opened, then closed. You. What do you? Transfers, Mark. Photos. Weekend retreats labeled as consulting. I especially liked the one with the towel wrapped around her and your Rolex on the sink behind her. Very tasteful. He exploded. You went through my accounts? I manage your accounts, I said. That's what you asked me to do. Remember? He stood there, shaking with fury. You want to ruin me? No, I said softly. I want to liberate myself. If ruining you is collateral damage, I'll sleep just fine. He stormed out of the room, slamming doors upstairs like a sulking teenager. I didn't follow. The next day, I moved half of our joint savings into a legal trust in my name, just in case. My lawyer was ready. The accountant was working overtime. The IRS was copied. I also filed a formal complaint with the board of his biggest client, an international shipping firm, attaching flagged expense reports. Their compliance officer thanked me and said, "This isn't the first concern we've had about Mr. Wexley." By the end of the week, Mark had lost 2 contracts and was being investigated for financial misconduct. And still, he didn't apologize. He sulked. He shouted. He tried to gaslight me into believing I was ruining both our lives. But when I didn't bend, he began sleeping at his office. Perfect. More time for me to prepare the finale. It was a Tuesday morning when I served him the papers. Not by email. Not through his lawyer. I delivered them myself to his office, right in the middle of his emergency staff meeting. I wore the same navy dress he once mocked as too old, a fresh blowout, and red lipstick that matched the cover of the folder I dropped onto the conference table. His assistant had tried to stop me. Mrs. Wexley, he's in a... I know, I said calmly, smiling. This will only take a moment. Mark looked up, startled. His team glanced between us like they were watching a live grenade roll into the room. What the hell are you doing here? He hissed. I came to give you these. I slid the folder across the table. Divorce papers, ownership reassessment, and a full report on misappropriated company funds. I've already sent copies to your legal team, your accountant, and the compliance officers at your 2 remaining contracts. He stared at me, frozen. I'm also pulling my name from the company, I continued. I'll accept a full buyout, negotiated by my attorney. Or, if you can't afford that, we can liquidate. A junior staffer coughed. Someone else shifted in their chair. The silence in the room was unbearable, deliciously unbearable. You're doing this now? Mark growled. In front of everyone? Why not? I said, tilting my head. You seemed to enjoy the public display last time. His jaw clenched. I could see the rage building behind his eyes. But he didn't explode. Not here. Not in front of people who might see him for what he truly was. I'll ruin you for this, he muttered under his breath. You think you're clever? No, I said. I think I'm free. I walked out without looking back. Not dramatic. Not fast. Just sure. That night, I changed the locks. He didn't come home. A week later, his lawyer offered a settlement, aggressive, insulting. My lawyer laughed and sent back a counteroffer that made him choke. I wasn't looking to destroy him financially, but I wasn't going to make it easy either. Every insult, every belittlement, every rolled eye, every public embarrassment, every moment I swallowed for years, I returned, one legal clause at a time. When the buyout was finalized, I used part of the money to start something I'd been thinking about for years, a consulting service for women re-entering the workforce in their 40s and 50s. Women like me. Women who'd been sidelined, forgotten, dismissed. I called it Second Act, because that's exactly what this was. The silence in my new home wasn't heavy. It was calm, clean. After the divorce was finalized, I sold the house, his house, and bought a small place of my own. A one-story cottage with overgrown hydrangeas, creaky floors, and morning light that poured into the kitchen like a blessing. I painted the walls warm colors. I hung pictures of my travels. I bought a velvet chair just for reading and made sure there were always fresh flowers on the table. Not for anyone else. For me. Some mornings, I still caught myself expecting him to walk in. Not out of longing, just habit. But it passed quicker now. I didn't miss him. I missed who I thought he was. And that's a very different thing. The women I worked with through Second Act became more than clients. They became a community. We shared stories, fears, first interviews after 20-year gaps, quiet victories like getting insurance again or speaking up in meetings without our voices shaking. Some of them cried the first time they saw their names on a paycheck again. I understood that too well. One afternoon, I received a message from Caitlin. It was short, apologetic. She claimed she hadn't known I existed. I didn't reply, not because I hated her, because I'd already closed that chapter. She was a symptom, not the disease. As for Mark, he relocated. Last I heard, he was trying to start a consulting firm out west. Word got around about what happened, about the audit, the investigation. Some of his friends stopped calling. Others quietly distanced themselves. He became exactly what he feared most, a man people tolerated, not respected. And me? I thrived. I hosted dinner parties again, but this time with laughter that didn't hide tension. I learned to dance again in the kitchen, barefoot, wine glass in hand. The irony didn't escape me. But now, the wine stayed in the glass. One night, after lighting a candle and curling up in my reading chair, I looked around and realized something I never expected. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at him. Not at myself. Not even at the years I thought I'd lost. Because they weren't lost. They led me here. To this quiet. To this fire in my belly. To this peace I built with my own two hands. And if I had to walk through all that pain again to arrive at this place, I'd still walk it. Just with better shoes.